Today, I'm delighted to welcome author, consultant, coach, and one of the Thinkers 50, Dorie Clark, to the Digital HR Leaders podcast. Dorie, welcome to the show. You've got a great background from politics to now being a successful entrepreneur, and three times, I think, actually named one of the top 50 business thinkers in the world by Thinkers 50. Very prestigious list, that one. So to start, could you share a little bit about your journey, about how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, David, thank you so much for having me. So I came to the work that I'm doing now, consulting and speaking and advising in the management arena in a bit of a non-traditional way. I originally thought I would be an academic, and it didn't work. I got turned down by all of the places I applied to for doctorates. So I had to come up with a plan B for myself, which actually ended up ultimately starting me on my path. I ultimately wrote a book called Reinventing You, which was about professional reinvention, but I did a lot of it early in my career. I worked as a political journalist. I worked as a spokesperson on a variety of political campaigns in the US. I ran a nonprofit organization, but eventually I started my own consultancy 18 years ago, and so have been working with companies to help them and their leaders get better at what they do and get their messages out in a crowded and noisy sphere.
And you've probably had a much more enjoyable and fun career than you would have had as if you'd been an academic, which just proves that sometimes failing isn't a bad thing.
It's true. And in fact, one of the biggest lessons that I've derived from all of that is that, I was really interested in the idea of teaching and interacting with students, and I've managed to get to do that anyway. It's really reinforced for me the fact that so often in our professional lives, we tend to think, oh, well, there's one way to do this. In my mind, it was, okay, if you want to be a professor, you get a doctorate, and then you go out and you get hired, and it's a very standard traditional process. But there are actually exceptions everywhere in every field. You just have to find them. You have to find the side door. And so in my case, less than 3 years after I got turned down from all the doctoral programs, I was actually teaching at the university level. I had found another way in by teaching as a practitioner. I was a journalist at that time, and somebody literally sent an email around the newsroom saying, oh, hey, somebody dropped out. Does anyone want to teach a media class? And I'm like, yes, I will do that. So I think that it's a hopeful message. A lot of times people get turned down or blocked for opportunities that they want, and they say, well, it's never going to happen for me. I have to give up that dream. And the truth is, we often give up far too soon.
And we're going to talk a little bit about that in the next sort of 45 minutes. And actually, it just proves that sometimes it's not a straight linear path. It's a circuitous path to get to where we want to get to sometimes. So really, really good. So your book, The Long Game, which I'll put up there for the benefit of those on the video, excellent book, Long Game, How to be a Long-Term Thinker in a Short-Term World, has been going strong for almost 3 years now. For our listeners, could you give us a brief synopsis of the book?
Well, ultimately, the long game, the subtitle is, how to be a long-term thinker in a short-term world. And what we're really trying to get at is understanding and recognizing that, yes, we all have pressures that we face, whether it's needing to meet quarterly earnings or needing to respond to all the emails in your inbox. We have these obligations that press on us, but also, if we want to be successful, ultimately, if we want to have the lives and the careers and the businesses that we want to have, we can't afford to just be reactive all the time. We have to somehow find a way to carve out, even in the midst of all the mishigas coming at us, a path to identifying our long-term goals and pursuing them. And I do believe it's possible. And in the long game, I talk about the ways and the techniques that we can use to begin to carve out space for the strategic thinking that just about everybody says they want to do, but so few of us actually get to or make the time to do.
And it is getting harder and harder, isn't it? If we think of all the different ways that people can communicate with us now, you can start the day with good intentions that you've got a big piece of work that needs doing, you need thinking time to do it. I'll just go and check my emails. And then you just get lost in your emails, and then suddenly people start slacking you as well. And you actually end the day sometimes thinking you've not achieved anything. So obviously when you're talking about the long game, you're talking longer than a day, but it's a similar a similar kind of practice that it's so easy to get immersed in the here and now, and sometimes you need to put your head above the parapet and trying to think about, okay, well, what actually am I, or what is my organization trying to achieve? And it's hard, isn't it?
Absolutely. And you're putting your finger on something really important, David, which is at a really basic level. There's the saying, how we spend our days is how we spend our weeks and our months. And then, how we spend our months and years is how we spend our lives. And so we have to treat the time that we spend as a microcosm and really look into the question, what would make me proud at the end of the day? I don't think there's anybody that is proud that they processed email for 8 hours in a row. That's not really an existentially satisfying kind of thing. We want to make contributions. We want to create things. We want to make a mark or move something distinct forward. And if we continually deny ourselves the opportunity to do that because we keep saying, oh, but there's something more urgent, there's something more, more exigent that I have to do, then we are continually choosing, really, because it is a choice, to make our work less meaningful than it could be. And that is a habit, a bad habit that we get into that we really need to kind of break.
And it's self-defeating, isn't it, spending 8 hours sending emails, because you just get a lot more back.
Absolutely.
So in today's organizations, and actually, Dorie, for context, most of the people that listen to this podcast work in HR. So let's look at HR. So I think particularly in HR, we tend to get very reactive. We've just talked about, we're trying to put out fires, and it's easy to get overwhelmed. And it's difficult to take the time to reflect and maybe focus on the steps to achieving our long-term goals, or the long-term goals of the organization as well. What are some of the strategies that we can employ to help us create that space for strategic thinking?
Yeah, well, I think that one of the ways that you can pivot successfully from the short-term crises that sort of erupt regularly into a little bit more long-term thinking is actually to apply some of the methodology of the agile world. Agile has become so popular in software and in other elements. But one of the premises that I think is really useful is the idea that every time you take a step toward doing something, you should be thinking and asking yourself, okay, how can I systematize that for the future? How can I avoid having to take that same step again? And that's helpful. If a problem has emerged, whether it is some kind of a hiccup in a hiring process, or, maybe something has gone wrong and everybody's confused about the new benefits package or whatever, great, solve the problem today, but take a step toward recording it, creating a system, creating a fix upstream so that you don't have the same problem next year when everybody goes through the process again. And I like that. Another question that has been very helpful for me personally is asking yourself, and I really try to do this regularly, what is it that I can do today that will make tomorrow better and easier? It's really, I think of it as doing a favor for my future self. And so in a literal sense, it's, okay, maybe you want to work out tomorrow morning, so you set out the workout clothes so that it's the first thing you see. You don't have to think about it. You're ready. You're going to do it. But what are work equivalents of that? Maybe it's taking time now to look at your schedule for next month and say, oh, I have that really big presentation that's happening. I should probably, I know I'm going to need to get this information, this data, these images for it. Why don't I send the emails now to people so that I can put out the call to get those things so that they come in 3 weeks in advance, and I don't, freak everybody out by asking them 48 hours in advance. That is a favor both to your future self and to other people's future selves.
I'm guilty as charged on that one. And I'm thinking of, it's quite interesting, actually. It's a good way of looking at it. And is it also maybe sometimes questioning a little bit about some of the stuff that you're doing, and actually thinking, is this actually adding any value? Not just to me, but is this adding any value if you're in HR? Is this adding any value to the business, to the stakeholders that I'm serving with this? And because that's a good way sometimes of prioritizing a little bit, isn't it?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, one of the points that I make in the long game is that something that doesn't really get talked about explicitly, but I think we do need to raise it and name it, is that on a regular basis, I mean, let's call it every year, for example, we actually have to get more selective about what we say yes to. It is a reality that as we ascend in our careers and up the corporate ladder, you are going to have more demands on your time, more, potentially it's because you have more direct reports, but certainly at a minimum, it's that more people know you, more people expect things of you, more people know that you know certain things. So, ask David, he knows. And as a result, the incoming is just increased. I mean, when you're just starting out at a job, or just starting out in your career, I mean, nobody knows you. Nobody wants to talk to you. It's not a problem. You can afford to say yes to everything, and you probably should, because opportunities will arise and you don't know. I mean, what the heck? You're not doing anything better. But as you become more senior and more successful, you have a lot of legitimately valuable things that you could be doing. And so it may, I mean, this is ultimately the reason why people have such problems with it. It may bring up emotional issues for you. You might feel a little bit jerky saying no to people. You might feel like a bad person for not being helpful. But if we want to be successful at doing the things that matter for us in our career, rather than just being somebody else's errand boy, we have to become more and more systematically discerning about what we're doing and how we're spending our time.
No, that's really good. And I think HR is typically a support function. It's on its way to being a strategic partner, but it's still essentially seen by many as a support function. It's quite hard to say no, isn't it? It's quite hard to say no as an individual when someone more senior than you is saying something. It's quite hard to say no when someone quite influential in the business is maybe asking you to do something. What are some of the strategies that HR leaders, frankly, anyone can use to prioritize effectively and, ensure their teams are focusing on the most impactful projects and maybe give permission for people to say no? What are some of the things that we can do?
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that, David, because this is definitely a devil is in the details kind of thing. It might sound nice to say, say no more often, but in practical terms, people really struggle with it because they want to appear responsive. They want to appear like they're doing the things necessary that their higher ups are expecting of them. And so that's why in the long game, I actually lay out very specific scripts and strategies that people can use, because at a fundamental level, you are never going to get to the strategic stuff. Never. If your schedule is overstuffed with minutiae, there's just not space for it. It's not that it takes a huge amount of time to do strategy, but it takes some time. And if you have zero time, you're in a time deficit, it's not ever going to happen. So the first step is how do you clear out the dross and the dreck and make a little space for yourself? So there's a variety of things that you can do. I mean, one, to the point of systematization, is if people keep asking you the same questions, it's actually a really good idea to write it up, to literally have a document, or to put something on an internal website or whatever it is, so that instead of having to respond personally and privately, you can say, oh, great, here's the link, here's everything you need to know. So you do it once and you answer the question for all time. And also not just for you, but probably a lot of your colleagues. It can be helpful because then they won't be bothered with it as well. Another possibility is just sort of, I'll call it deferring and deflecting a little bit. So maybe somebody is coming to you with a request, oh, hey, I'd like your advice about this. And, it's somebody that you'd like to help, but it's certainly not an emergency. Okay, so you don't want to be a jerk. You don't want to say no, but it's really not a priority for you. So in that case, I actually really am fully in support of making people jump through some hoops, because that is essentially a way of ensuring that they prove themselves and they prove their seriousness. There are so many people in the world that they're happy to fire off an email with why the heck not? Let's see what happens. But then they don't have the follow through, they don't have the resolve, and they come off of it very quickly. You want to be investing your time in the people who actually are committed and who are just organized at a really basic level enough to follow up. So if you say to somebody, David, I would love to talk to you about that. We are having a really busy patch right now for the next 3 weeks, but I would be happy to talk with you about it next month. If you can email me in 3 weeks, let's set up a time. And okay, great. Put the onus on them. Well, guess what? If David is organized enough to email me in 3 weeks, he has actually shown me something really important. He's shown me he's the kind of guy that can get things done and is deserving of that half hour or hour that he wants to spend with me. So a little bit of delay tactics can be useful. And then finally, if something is coming from higher up, then I think oftentimes we hesitate to do this, but it's useful to make them adjudicate it a little bit. You can say, if David is my boss, say, David, that's great. I would love to help with this. Help me understand. I was under the impression that, topic A was the priority. And so I am going all in on that. That is how I've been intending to spend my entire week, is just pushing to get that done by Friday. So I could keep with that plan and get to this next week. Or if it turns out that this thing you're asking me right now is more important, I'm happy to move it to the front of the line. Please let me know what you think. And in that case, you are being perfectly responsive. You're being perfectly helpful, but you don't have to make some crazy calculation. You're just being overt with it, and they will make the call.
No, really good advice there, isn't it? It's like, yeah, I can do that, but what do you want me to drop?
Exactly.
But I think your way of doing it is far more eloquent, and you're really putting the onus back on the requester to actually make that decision around prioritization, which is important. And actually, we spend a lot of our time working with people analytics teams, and the question, they get inundated with requests for data, whether that's from HR business partners or people in the business, and what and it means that they spend all their time doing that and not the time doing some of the big analytical projects that could maybe add more value to the business and frankly more interesting for the professionals themselves. And actually, I think a lot of the people that have success with that, they actually put back, well, what do you need the data for? What's the problem you're trying to solve? And if people can't articulate that, then why do they need the data really? So, I mean, I think what you've just said there, Dorie, I think is really helpful for people, because it is a problem, and we are getting more and more overwhelmed as employees in all our organizations, all the various things coming at us, and part of this, I guess, is setting the right goals. How can you ensure your objectives are not only aligned with business strategy, which obviously is important, but also adaptable to future changes as well, because everything seems to be changing so fast as well?
Yeah, it's certainly true. One of the themes that I really like to focus on is the idea of provisional hypotheses. Because ultimately, if we're being intellectually honest, that's what we've got, right? No one knows the future. Oftentimes, the future will proceed roughly the way that we expect, but it's also true, and we have all seen with things like the pandemic, there can be extremely sharp divergences that happen out of the blue that nobody predicts, that are massively disruptive. We just don't know. And so as a result, the best that we can do is to have a hypothesis. You do need to have one, because you need to be marching towards something, because again, most of the time things will probably proceed the way that you're anticipating. So under, the most of the time circumstance, if you are working toward a clear goal, okay, great. You will march along and get there nicely. But ultimately, when things are disruptive, we just have to hold it lightly. In Silicon Valley, there's a saying that gets thrown around, which is strong opinions lightly held. And I think there's a lot of merit to that. I mean, yes, have your hypothesis, march toward it. But if the facts change, or if the circumstances on the ground change, it's doing no one any favors to be wedded to it. Be ready to shift and pivot when the circumstances warrant.
And and I guess if you don't, then you're probably going to go down the wrong cul-de-sac, really, aren't you? So, often though we fear failure, which it can set us back from achieving our goals. You gave a great example at the start, where you wanted to go down one path, that those doors weren't open to you, so you went down another path and eventually got to that, as well as what else you were doing. In HR, this can be quite the paradox as we try to infuse a culture of innovation and creativity into the organization, but we often resist applying it to our own function due to fear of failure. What's your take on this topic, and how can our listeners overcome this mindset and but also ensure that it's instilled into the company culture as well?
Well, I think you raise a really important point here. And a theme that I talk about in the long game is the fact that as long as we are naming when something is an experiment, to a certain extent, that actually helps inoculate you against failure. Because if we're proceeding along, oh yes, this is the way, I know the way, this'll work, and then it doesn't, well, of course it's embarrassing, right? You lose face and everybody says, wait, I thought she knew what she was talking about here. But if we're really clear about what is established protocol and, a fact that, yes, we know this is replicable versus we're trying something new, we're experimenting, it might not work, but we will gather interesting data that will be helpful in the future. No one afterwards is going to be, lambasting you for that unless you've overshot and, somehow put millions of dollars at risk or whatever, assuming it is a normal sized experiment. You can say, look, we said from the beginning, this was an experiment. We were going to try it for a month to be fully remote and see how it worked. Or we were going to try it for a month with, the new organizational design, or, whatever it is. You can have short-term pilots, you can have tests, you can have experiments, and you see. And if it looks like it's working, you do more. And if it looks like it's not, that's fine. You can pivot without having failed. Failure is actually irrelevant when it comes to something that you have declared an experiment, because the success is in the gathering of data, not the yes or no.
Yeah, and as you said, it's experiment, and be clear that we're experiment. We're going to try this. We're going to try it for an X period of time, and this is how we're going to measure whether it's successful or not. And then when we get to the end of that, we'll have a discussion. And as you said, if we think we've been successful, then we'll maybe expand it, or we'll take what we've learned and maybe slightly pivot a bit, and as you said, it's not a failure per se, and actually failing sometimes can be good because we learn from failure and we can become more successful. So it is trying to get over that fear of failure that maybe we have. Maybe it's an innate trait of human beings, I don't know, but we need to get over this fear of failure, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's right on. How long have you been doing this show, David?
We've been doing this for, I think, it will be our 5th anniversary in May.
I love it. I mean, I'm curious. Did it feel risky to you when you were starting it, or in the earliest days? How did you think about the fear of failure if the show hadn't taken?
Well, it's interesting because when we started, this was back in 2019, pre-pandemic. We thought, well, we're going to do it a little bit different to other podcasts. We're going to do all our interviews face to face in a studio in our office in London. So we thought that would be good. Obviously it meant it was quite difficult to get guests from outside the UK, but we did it, and it was pretty successful. People seemed to like it. And then, but there was that fear. No one might listen to it. We might think it's really good, but it might just be my mum or something that listens to it. But we were quite lucky. We had some people listening to it, and then obviously the pandemic happened. It's like, okay, we're going to need to pivot from that approach of having everyone face to face. And now, while we still do the occasional podcast recording face to face, they're mostly like this because that enables us to work with guests from different parts of the world, like you. And it's more convenient. And actually, the sound quality is just as good. And the interaction, on a platform like Riverside is just as good as well. But yes, you're right. There was that fear of failing at the start, and at various stages we've tried a few things, and then we've learned from it and pivoted, which I guess is similar for you in your work, Dorie, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. One element of the book that I really wanted to include quite deliberately was I have an entire chapter. I wrote the book during the kind of heart of the pandemic in 2020. And so a lot of times in our failure narratives professionally, people will say, well, tell me about a time that you failed. And so a lot of us have stories, in our back pocket that are things from like 20 years ago. Oh, when I was first starting out, I had this terrible boss and and this didn't work, but I was able to overcome it. And even though I had, I got reprimanded, but I was, eventually, whatever it is. But it's just way back in the past so that it's safe. It's very safe when your failure is a long time ago. And I decided I wanted to be really clear that failure, I say in air quotes, failure, whatever that means, is something that is always with us. Because if we are stretching, if we're growing, if we're trying to do different things, almost definitionally, if you're doing something you haven't done before, sometimes it will work and sometimes it won't. And that's sort of the measure that you're stretching yourself. So in the long game, I actually had this whole chapter about 5 different things that I attempted during the calendar year 2019, speaking of when you launched your podcast, and 4 out of the 5 did not work. And, I kind of break them down. One was and the tragic part was like they kind of almost worked. Like it wasn't a pipe dream. They almost worked. Like, one was I was invited to try out as a columnist for a major publication, and I was a finalist, but they didn't pick me. And another one was I was going to co-write a book with a very famous author, and and the person agreed, and I wrote the proposal and all the things, and then literally when it was done and I showed it to him, he was like, oh, and he had just gotten offered $1 million to write a different book. I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to get between you and $1 million. I get it. It was just this series of like humiliations. And so no matter how successful we are, air quotes, no matter how far along we are in our careers, we just have to get over ourselves, right? It's not like we think it's a referendum sometimes on our professional identity that we can't fail. Well, guess what? If we hold it lightly, then it's not really reflecting on us. It's just, okay, I tried a thing, it didn't work. Maybe there'll be a side door a few years from now.
Yeah, I think it's really good advice. I mean, if I actually sat and analysed, I'd probably fail at least once a week. It might be quite a small thing, might be a bigger thing, but I probably fail once a week. And what I try and do is learn what can I take from that to if I'm doing something similar in the future to not fail again. So yeah, I mean it's I think and maybe I don't know, maybe with me I found as I've got older I'm more comfortable with failing, and when I was younger maybe that was not something I wanted to admit to, whereas now I think it is interesting. And that kind of brings me to the chapter that you've got on strategic patience in the long game, because I think sometimes we can think we failed when maybe we've just not been patient enough. I know I'm definitely guilty of that. And I see it time and time again in HR that we will give up on our strategies if they're not producing immediate results. And I think in today's business world, there's increasing pressure around that as well. Sometimes you have to bite the bullet, of course, and accept something isn't working. But how do you decide when it's time to pivot or persevere? How can we differentiate between the need for patience versus the need for adjusting our strategy?
Yeah, you've raised something really important, because as I was exploring the topic of strategic thinking and, the patience that sort of necessity has to accompany it sometimes, because inevitably some goals just do take a long time, no matter how much we would like them to be quick, they're just not. What I came to understand is that so often the fear that many people have, I heard it again and again, is they were afraid essentially to kind of look like a sucker. They were afraid, but what if I stay too long doing a thing that's not working? And that's the thing. They don't want to look stupid. But the ironic thing is that in the pursuit of not looking stupid, like the last person attempting a thing, they often bail too quickly, and it almost systematically precludes them from having the success that they want. and may well have achieved because they just did not give it enough time to come to fruition. So it's a really important question. How do you know the difference? And I would say that one of the most important things is actually an upstream answer. Sometimes we try to answer it when we're in the middle of it, and in the middle of it is a terrible time because you are subject to all of these emotions about, oh no, it's miserable, it's not happening, I better quit. Well, upstream, before you start, that is a time that you need to be starting to establish metrics that are, laid out, written down in advance. And how do you get metrics? Well, the good news about most things in corporate life is that, while there are rare exceptions, in almost all cases, the thing that you want to do, whether it is coming up with a new compensation system at your company, whether it is switching over to a different CRM, whether it is coming up with a new recruitment strategy, whatever it is, it's been done by someone else in the past. Maybe it's another competitor in your industry. Maybe you have to draw a little further afield. Maybe it's a different industry, but somebody has done this before. And we often fail to do even basic due diligence, trying to understand, what did it look like for them? How long did it take them? What were some of the milestones there? What were some of the hang-ups? If we do even a modicum of research, and try to get 2 or 3 different case studies, you can begin to triangulate, right? I mean, it's not to say that your process is going to be the same as everybody else's process, but if you look at examples, and it took these guys 24 months, it took these guys 36 months, it took these guys 19 months, it's probably not going to get done for you in 8 weeks. And so, a big problem is that because we haven't done the due diligence, we think that we have waited so long and we've been so patient. It's just so obvious it's not working. And yet we haven't even gotten halfway to where it should be on average because we just didn't check. So I think that starting upstream and asking the right questions and understanding the milestones can help avoid a world of hurt once we get into it, whatever the it is.
Yeah, because some things take time, like putting humans on the moon, for example. And you need to play, to quote your book, the long game to actually get there. So, Dorie, if you were to leave our audience, and we've got one question after this actually, which is the question of the series, but if you were to leave our audience with one key takeaway from the long game that could transform their approach to HR and to leadership, what would it be?
Yeah, thank you, David. Well, I think that one of the most important things, and this was very salient for me writing it during the pandemic, was a concept that I talk about in the long game, which is heads up and heads down mode. And, I think so often people who are diligent and responsible operators are almost perennially stuck in heads down mode, where they are executing, they are doing the things, they are just grinding at work. And of course there's a place for that. That is very important. That is, during the pandemic, that was kind of how we all needed to be. But I think a lot of us have stayed in that mode, and that's great. But it's also equally important for all of us, both in terms of our sort of, career satisfaction, but also the strategic imperatives of our business, to recognize that that is not the only way to be. If we want to be successful, just like there's circadian rhythms in our bodies, there need to be rhythms in our professional life. And periodically we need to go into heads up mode, where we are looking around and strategically evaluating the landscape. Have things changed? What has changed? What are the implications of that? Are the things that I have been, jamming on, are those still the right things, or do I need to change my approach? And toggling periodically between those things is one of the most valuable things that we can do. And just reminding ourselves, because we tend to get in habits, we tend, to have sort of personalities that tilt more in one direction than another. But a successful professional has to be both and do both.
No, I think that's a really good advice. And if I think about it in HR, it's very easy to be heads down, focusing on the work that you're doing, But as you said, you need to put your head up sometimes, not just within the organization as well. You need to look at what the external factors that are maybe impacting on the company as well, and just think, as you said, is it time to pivot, or is it time to persevere even more, because this is actually even more important than we thought it was. So that's a great piece of advice, Dorie. And so this is a question of the series. So this is something we're asking everyone on this series as well. So we've got different guests, practitioners, as well. What are the top 3 ways you believe where HR could play a pivotal role in creating a thriving organizational culture? And please draw from the long game if you want to draw from the long game, or the other work that you're doing.
Absolutely. So in terms of HR's ability to contribute to a thriving corporate culture, I mean, probably one of the most salient pieces, of course, is the talent pipeline. And so when it comes to playing the long game, I think, a literal day-to-day challenge of HR is that, everybody, is sort of grabbing at your ankles, asking you these really basic questions about, oh, tell me about the healthcare plan. Tell me about the retirement package. And, it's nice, you got to do it. But ultimately, where HR is really going to be able to establish itself the way it should, as a trusted partner and collaborator for everybody in the business, it's about thinking through how HR can use its talents to further the overall business interests. And that means retaining people, and it means recruiting the right people. And so the more any HR professional is able to sort of mitigate and deal with the, sort of niggling operational questions, but reserve their time and their brain space for important business strategic objectives and coming up with helpful, concrete, tangible plans that you can, bring to business partners and say, hey, here's what we've come up with. Is this helpful to you? Let's talk. Let's collaborate. How can HR be, working hand in glove with you to help get you the talent you need to fill these essential roles for the future? I think, that's a crucial element right there. I think another way that HR can be critical in building a powerful corporate culture is in creating the atmosphere of continual learning and professional development. Really sort of instituting that as the kind of growth mindset of the business. I give a lot of talks to companies where one of the things that they're dealing with is this, sort of emerging reality amongst employees that, of course, has been brewing for 20, 30 years, which is that we don't so much have corporate ladders anymore. It's not so much, oh, okay, you get on here and then, 30 years later you get off there. It's much more choose your own adventure. It's much more individually directed. You don't just get promoted for standing around for 2 years and then you move on somewhere else. And so having HR really take a lead in helping everyone understand that this is your own journey, that you need to be autonomous, and we will help you, but you need to be responsible for sort of making important choices here. And here's a buffet of development options, but you need to pick some things, and you need to be choosing that for yourself. I think is crucially important in terms of empowering employees to have the career that they want. Because so many still, unfortunately, are kind of in the mindset of passive, like, oh, well, things will be done to me. I will be trained. This will happen to me, rather than you making it happen. I think that's another crucial element. And finally, I would say that when it comes to HR and its overall role in shaping culture, I recently wrote a piece with my colleague Alexis Redding for Harvard Business Review, where we're talking about fundamental ways to build a culture of belonging at work. And it's good for so many reasons. I mean, retention, of course, but also just being the kind of company that any company wants to be, getting the most out of its employees because they are motivated to show up and work and do well. And it's none of it is crazy, none of it's rocket science, but it's feeling seen, heard, and valued at a fundamental level. And so that means things like, which so many great HR people are doing, helping managers, be thoughtful with their employees. Again, we were just saying it's both and, right? Employees are responsible for their own journey. And also, it is a mitzvah when bosses take the time to help them discover new opportunities that they aren't aware of and think through strategically, okay, given your interests, given your talents, where can we go and how can we develop things? And just creating a culture where people do get noticed, where if you have a hobby, other people take an interest in that, where people seem to value the things that you say and take them seriously. And when we put a stake in the ground in creating that kind of culture, it helps everyone.
No, very good. And I was thinking when I was listening to the first one that you mentioned, Dorie, how technology can be a potential game changer here for HR, to deliver more value, because all these more mundane requests that we get, as you said, about the retirement policy, about the health policy, if we can actually enable some of those questions to be answered via AI, Gen AI technology, then it allows us as HR professionals to focus much more on the stuff where we can really make a difference and really add value both to individuals and the organization. So yeah, some really good thoughts there on how we can create that thriving culture. I think within HR can help create that thriving culture within the organization. Dorie, thanks so much for being a guest on the Digital HR Leaders podcast. I certainly recommend the long game to anyone listening. Can you let listeners know how they can connect with you on social media, find out more about your work? I think you have your own website, for example, and also find out more about the long game and the other books that you've written.
David, thank you so much. Yeah, for folks who are interested in this discussion and in particular becoming an even deeper long-term thinker, I do have a free resource, which is the Long Game Strategic Thinking Self-Assessment. Folks can get it for free at dorieclark.com/thelonggame. And on my website, as you mentioned, I have more than 800 free articles available that I've written for places like Harvard Business Review and Forbes and Entrepreneur. And folks can get them on the articles page of my website for free, just dorieclark.com.
Brilliant. Well, we'll certainly put a connection to that in the show notes. Dorie, it just leads me to say I've really enjoyed our conversation. It's been a really long day, but you've given it a very good ending. So thank you very much for being a guest on the Digital HR Leaders podcast.
David, thank you so much.
Thank you.
In this series, we will be speaking to a range of senior leaders who are pushing a data-driven and digital HR agenda. Make sure that you subscribe via your podcast app of choice and also via our YouTube channel for free and regular interviews with the digital HR leaders of the future.